He stood on an empty stage, but in his head it felt like 1,000 voices were screaming at once. The echo didn't come from the chairs in front of him, but from a past that never left. "You'll mess it up again. They'll laugh at you." That old voice whispered like a curse. He closed his eyes, heart racing, realizing he wasn't just facing a stage. He was facing the biggest enemy he had ever known, his own memory. From the outside, he looked fine. Shirt ironed, hair neat, just another man about to give a talk. But inside, he was carrying an invisible prison. A scene that had burned itself into his mind, playing like a broken record. Maybe you felt it too. That one memory so heavy, it decides who you are every single day. His breath grew heavier, like every inhale pulled in fear instead of air. The silence of the empty room wasn't the problem. The noise inside was. A voice saying over and over, "You're not good enough." He looked at his hands and saw them trembling, years after it had happened. The scar wasn't on his skin. It was deeper than that. But here's the twist no one could see. Not even him. What looked like his weakest moment was hiding a power he hadn't discovered yet. That stage wasn't just a place of fear. It was the battlefield where past and future were about to collide. This wasn't only about a speech. It was about rewriting a life. And so comes the question that changes everything. What if the worst memory of your life is actually the key to your greatest strength? That's the line between staying a prisoner or finally becoming free. You're about to see the truth unfold. So before we dive deeper into his story, I want to pause and tell you this. If you've ever carried a memory that held you back, this channel is for you. Here, we don't just share stories. We uncover hidden strength, hope, and second chances. Hit that subscribe button right now so you never face your battles alone. Together, we'll turn scars into power and pain into purpose. The memory takes us back to a crowded classroom, the smell of chalk in the air, papers rustling, sneakers squeaking on the floor. He was just a boy, standing in front of 30 classmates, clutching his notes with sweaty hands. His voice cracked as he started, and before he could finish the first sentence, laughter spilled across the room. It wasn't just noise, it was a dagger. The teacher cleared his throat, but didn't really step in, just shook his head and muttered something about being prepared next time. The classmates laughed louder, some whispering, some pointing, a few banging on their desks. And in the middle of it all, his face burned red, his throat locked, and the words he wanted to say died inside him. Not everyone joined in. A boy in the back, his only real friend, looked down, ashamed of the cruelty around him. He wanted to help, but fear of being targeted kept him silent. That silence hurt almost as much as the laughter. He realized in that moment no one was going to save him. The stage was his alone. He sat back down, but something had already shifted. From that day forward, he wasn't just a student anymore. He was the boy who couldn't speak without people laughing. That single humiliation replayed in his mind so often it carved itself into his identity. Every time he saw a group of people, he saw an audience ready to laugh. Every time he had a chance to speak, he heard the echo of that day. What he didn't know yet was that this wound wasn't finished with him. It would follow him into adulthood, into every decision, every chance he turned down. But what happens when life forces you to face the very memory you've tried so hard to bury? That moment was coming sooner than he expected. Years passed, but the echo of that classroom never left him. Now a grown man with a steady job, he moved through life quietly, almost invisible. At meetings, he sat in the corner, taking notes, nodding when spoken to, but he never volunteered, never raised his hand, never let his voice carry. On paper, he looked competent. In reality, he was shrinking. Colleagues noticed it. Some teased him gently. "Hey man, do you ever talk?" Others didn't bother hiding their doubts. He's not leadership material. Even the boss who appreciated his hard work never trusted him with presentations. He wasn't the guy you called when it was time to pitch, inspire, or represent the team. He was the guy who stayed in the background, doing the work no one saw. Inside, it was torture. He'd go home at night replaying conversations in his head, thinking of all the things he should have said but didn't. His silence wasn't peace. It was a prison cell with no bars. And every time he stayed quiet, the memory of that classroom only grew stronger. It was like he had carried the mocking laughter of his classmates into every boardroom. Friends outside of work tried to encourage him. A cousin once told him, "You're smart, man. You should be leading." A woman he dated said, "I wish you'd speak your mind more. You've got depth." But he brushed it all off with a smile, hiding the truth. The truth was simple. He believed one failure as a boy had decided the rest of his life. But life has a way of setting traps for our fears, and soon an opportunity at work would appear that he couldn't run from. It would drag him out of the shadows, back into the light he had spent years avoiding. The same stage he swore he'd never face again was already being built around him.
It started with a project nobody wanted to touch. The client was demanding, the deadline was impossible, and the pressure was sky high. His team leader looked around the table, eyes landing on the quiet man in the corner. "You've been the backbone of this whole thing," the boss said. "You know the details better than anyone. You're presenting it." The words dropped like a weight he wasn't ready to carry. For a second, the room spun. Presenting? Him? Every instinct screamed no. His mouth went dry, his chest tight. He wanted to shake his head to find an excuse, to hide behind another spreadsheet. But before he could speak, the decision was made. The meeting ended with pats on the back and half-hearted "good lucks." He walked out feeling like he'd been pushed onto a stage with no script. There was only one person who didn't seem blind to his panic: Mark, the only real friend he had at work. Mark was different. He wasn't loud or flashy, but he carried himself with calm confidence. When projects went wrong, he breathed through them. When arguments broke out, he chose silence until it was wise to speak. His control over his own emotions was obvious, almost enviable. Later that day, Mark found him by the coffee machine, hunched over, staring at the floor. "Hey," Mark said softly, "I know what's going on in your head. You think you can't do this because of some ghost from the past. But listen, this isn't about perfection. It's about owning your story. This project was given to you for a reason. Don't run from it. Face it." He wanted to argue, to say Mark didn't understand, but the truth was, Mark did understand, maybe better than anyone. And in that moment, a thought he'd never allowed before began to flicker. What if this isn't a curse? What if it's a chance? He didn't believe it yet, not fully, but the seed was planted. And soon, that seed would grow into the most important decision of his life. And if this story is already speaking to you, if you've ever felt the weight of a memory trying to hold you back, don't let this moment pass. Hit the like button right now. It's not just a click, it's your way of saying, "I'm ready to face my own story too." Every like tells YouTube to bring more people into this journey, people just like you who need hope, courage, and a reminder that their scars can turn into power. That night, his apartment felt heavier than usual. He sat at his small kitchen table, staring at the blank page of a notebook, his mind racing. One voice told him to quit, send an email, make up an excuse, get out before he embarrassed himself. Another voice, quieter but stubborn, whispered, "What if this is your chance to finally break free?" The conflict was unbearable. He got up, paced the room, tried distracting himself with TV, but the fear followed him like a shadow. The thought of standing in front of people again made his chest ache. It was as if that school classroom had stretched itself into the future and was waiting for him at work. He clenched his fists, fighting tears of frustration. Then his phone buzzed. A short text from Mark lit up the screen. "Don't let an old ghost own you. You can either feed the memory of pain or start building a new one tomorrow." Simple words, but they landed like a spark in a dark room. For the first time, he wondered if the memory was only powerful because he kept feeding it. He sat back down and picked up a pen. On the left side of the page, he wrote, "My pain." He listed the laughter, the humiliation, the silence that followed him for years. On the right side, he wrote, "My power." Hesitant at first, then stronger. He wrote, "I survived. I kept going. I built knowledge. I never gave up on working hard." His eyes widened as he realized maybe the same story had two sides. It wasn't magic, not yet. He still felt the fear, the old wound pressing against him. But something had shifted. He saw for the first time that pain and power lived in the same memory. And deep down he knew he couldn't run from the project. The question was no longer if he would face it, but how. The next morning he stood in front of the mirror, shoulders slouched, eyes tired. For a moment he almost laughed at himself. Talking to his own reflection? It felt ridiculous. But then he remembered Mark's words echoing in his head. He clenched his jaw, looked himself in the eyes, and whispered, "I control my mind. My mind does not control me." The words trembled at first, but they were words he'd never dared to say. Day after day he practiced. 1 minute of deep breathing before work. 5 minutes of closing his eyes and imagining himself speaking with confidence. Each time, fear tried to interrupt, flooding him with old memories. But he kept pushing through, repeating autosuggestions until they sounded less like a lie and more like a seed planting itself in the soil of his mind. Mark noticed the small changes. "You're walking straighter," he told him one afternoon. "Your voice doesn't shake as much when you speak up." At first he wanted to dismiss the compliment, but secretly it meant the world to him. It was proof that even tiny steps, invisible to most, were already rewriting his story. Still, it wasn't easy. Some mornings he woke up with doubt crushing his chest, convinced he'd fail. But instead of hiding, he grabbed his notebook. Left side, pain. Right side, power. Each entry turned the volume down on his fears and turned it up on his strength. It was like building muscle. Slow, painful, but undeniable. The day of the presentation was getting closer. He could feel the countdown with every sunrise, every tick of the office clock. But this time the thought of standing in front of people didn't feel like a death sentence. It felt like a battlefield where he might actually stand a chance. The warrior inside him was waking up.
The morning of the presentation arrived like a storm. He dressed carefully, straightened his tie twice, but nothing could hide the tremor in his hands. The elevator ride to the conference room felt endless, each floor's ding echoing like a warning bell. His chest was tight, his breathing shallow. Yet deep inside, a flicker of determination refused to go out. The room was packed. Colleagues sat with laptops open, the client already scrolling through his phone impatiently. His boss gave him a quick nod, more like an order than encouragement. He felt the old fear surge up, dragging him back to that school classroom. For a second, the laughter of children mixed with the whispers of adults. The memory was alive again. But then he remembered the mirror. He remembered the notebook. He remembered Mark's calm voice saying, "Don't let an old ghost own you." He took one deep breath, counting slowly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The shaking didn't stop completely, but his focus sharpened. The fear was still there, but it wasn't driving the car anymore. He looked across the table and saw Mark, sitting quietly, giving him a steady look. No words, just a nod that said, "You've got this." For the first time, he believed maybe he did. His heart still pounded, but beneath it was a rhythm of strength he hadn't felt before. His voice was ready, even if it was only a whisper at first. He stood, walked to the front, and placed his notes on the podium. The room fell silent. Every eye turned toward him. His throat tightened. His palms were wet. The first word hovered on his lips, and then... And before we step into what happens next, I want to ask you something personal. Have you ever faced a moment where the past tried to silence you? If this story is stirring something inside you, drop a single word in the comments. Courage. Let it be more than a comment. Let it be your declaration that fear won't control you anymore. The first word almost died in his throat. His voice cracked, thin and shaky, and for a heartbeat he thought the nightmare was about to repeat. A whisper of that old laughter echoed in his head. But then something shifted. He gripped the podium tighter, drew a breath, and forced the next sentence out. This time, his voice didn't break, it carried. At first, his eyes stayed locked on his notes. He read stiffly, every line rehearsed, until he caught a glimpse of the client looking up, actually listening. That glance gave him courage. He straightened his back, lifted his head, and let his words flow. The trembling in his hands didn't vanish, but it no longer owned him. The memory was losing its grip. The room grew still. Colleagues leaned forward, the client stopped scrolling, and even his boss seemed surprised. The silence wasn't mocking, it was respect. And in that silence, he felt something he hadn't felt since he was a boy. Control. His words filled the space that once held his fear. For the first time, he wasn't running from the memory. He was rewriting it. When he finished, there was no laughter, just a quiet moment, then a ripple of nods, a clap, another, until the whole room applauded. His chest tightened again, but not with fear, but with something heavier, warmer. Pride, relief, freedom. For years, he thought that one memory had ended his story, but standing there, he realized it had only prepared him for this moment. Afterward, he slipped into the restroom and faced the mirror. The boy who had been laughed at was still there, but now he looked different, older, stronger. He touched the sink, staring at his reflection, whispering, "The same memory that haunted me is now my proof of strength." But what he didn't yet know, this turning point was only the beginning. When he left the restroom that day, something inside him was different. The fear hadn't vanished completely, but it no longer chained him. For years he believed he was defined by one memory of failure. Now, standing in the hallway with the echo of applause still ringing in his ears, he realized that memory had been rewritten. It was no longer a prison, it was a milestone. What made the difference wasn't luck or even talent. It was the decision to face the ghost instead of feeding it. The notebook, the mirror, the breathing, the whispered affirmations, small things he once thought were silly, had built a foundation strong enough to hold him up. And behind it all, Mark's steady voice had been the reminder he couldn't give himself: "You are not your past." That victory stayed with him. Days later, when his boss called him in, it wasn't to criticize, it was to congratulate. The client was impressed. "I want you to lead the next pitch."
He blinked in disbelief, the words almost too heavy to take in. Lead? Him? The boy who once couldn't finish a single sentence in front of a class? The man who had hidden in shadows for years? Now he was the one chosen to stand in the spotlight? Weeks later, he did it again. And this time, his voice didn't crack at the start. It carried from the first word. He saw nods, he saw eyes paying attention, and for the first time in his life, he saw himself as someone worth listening to. That second victory wasn't just proof to others, it was proof to himself that the change was real. He had healed, not because the past disappeared, but because he had faced it, claimed it, and turned it into power. And in doing so, he discovered something unforgettable. The same memory that once tried to break him had become the stone on which he built his strength. This was more than success at work. It was freedom. So here's what his journey teaches us. The past doesn't vanish, but it doesn't have to own you. A scar is not proof of weakness. It's proof you survived. And sometimes the very memory that haunted you was training you for the moment you'd need the most strength. His victory wasn't about one presentation. It was about claiming back his voice, and with it, his life. Maybe you have a memory like that too. One that tries to silence you, one that whispers you're not enough. Let his story remind you that memory is not the end of your story. It may be the very place where your hidden power is waiting, because freedom isn't found in erasing the past. It's found in rewriting its meaning. And now it's your turn. If this story touched you, hit the like button right now. Not for me, for you. Every like is your way of saying, I refuse to be controlled by my past. And if you're ready to keep walking with us through stories of healing, hope, and hidden strength, subscribe to the channel today. Don't watch alone. Walk with a community that believes in turning scars into power. Finally, I want to hear from you. In the comments, write the word power. Let it be your declaration, your reminder that no matter what memory tries to hold you down, you've got strength waiting to rise. And when you see others writing it too, know you're not alone in this fight. Together, we're rewriting our stories. So take a deep breath, look at the mirror tonight, and whisper the words he once did. I control my mind. My mind does not control me. Because your worst memory might be hiding your greatest power, and the world is waiting for you to show it.